There was a question just here, and then a couple here.
Very early in the... Sorry, Laurie Hammond. Very early
From?
I'm an investor in technology companies, IQ funds.
Thank you very much.
Early in the discussion tonight was a reference to, in the context of access, enablement, empowerment, to group decision making, and I think it was an example that applied to women's health. How do you reconcile that with the contrary, and I thought probably more powerful trend towards personalised medicine that's enabled by bioinformatics, collective decision making, personalised medicine?
Well, they're certainly not inconsistent.
Yeah.
It's not.
I mean, human beings, one of the reasons that the human species has dominated is our ability for collective decision-making. So even 1,000 years ago, you know, the clan could get together and pool its skills and do things which no individual could do. And as technology has improved, you know, when we had books or even scrolls and then books and so on, we've improved our ability to do collective decision-making and problem solving. And there are now, you know, software systems that allow people all over the world to collaborate. And there have been mathematical theorems that absolutely couldn't have been solved any other way other than through this kind of open source collaboration. And patient groups, as I mentioned, are getting together to solve diseases. And it's a very powerful methodology. And one of the advances we're discovering is that, yes, medicine is personalized. We have different genetic backgrounds, and you know, many diseases are caused by genetic variations, and that's something that we can utilize to solve disease. Cancer is a very personalized disease, and so the solution is going to reside in taking advantage of, you know, those genetic specifics of each person, but that's something we can actually advance through collaborative decision-making. They're two different concepts.
Tenley.
Yeah, I was going to say the same point. I mean, I agree with what Ray's saying. We can move on to another question.
Great. Next question.
Ben Schofield from Department of Sustainability and Environment here in Melbourne. I'm just wondering, it sort of occurs to me because of my interest in the environment and whatever, that in some ways we are a super connected world in terms of natural laws, and these things are revealed through mathematics and science. I just wonder, with the growing information technology and electronic technology, we have the potential to move towards artificial life. And to what degree do you think there's a potential for dualism in that? Or to what degree do you think there's a potential for convergence?
Well, artificial life, there's a journal called Artificial Life, which I've been involved with for years, actually. And it can mean sort of two different things. It can mean artificial protein-based life of the sort that Craig Venter is now looking into. That's certainly possible, and we're on the edge of it. Or it could be something that is, in a very strong sense, not a metaphorical sense, alive, but living in cyberspace. And there's been work on that for many years, too, going back to something like Tierra of Tom Ray's, which was a self-replicating virus-like thing, which would take over the memory of your computer. When Tom developed that, we were at an artificial life meeting out at the Santa Fe Institute, and he talked about wanting to release it onto the internet. At the time, it was on a disconnected computer. And I remember a bunch of us saying, Ray, believe your own hype. You don't want to release this because it could spread all over, it could spread all over the world and all over everybody's computer and mutate faster than you imagine. And when recombinant DNA research first got going, they had an international committee that met, and they worked out really quite strict rules about how to prevent the release of monsters, to put it bluntly. And it's worked really very well. And I think we don't have to be that worried about the release of genetically engineered entities. Notice there is no way you can quarantine artificial life in the other sense. Simply no way at all. So that if somebody does develop something which will run amok around the planet on the internet, there's no negative atmosphere isolation system that will keep it off the internet.
No, Bruce Willis.
We do have software viruses which are exactly that. They self-replicate and they're pathogens. And we do have antiviral software, which is a technological immune system. And so far it's kept pace with the problem.
Harry Buskus from the Department of Business and Innovation. I think it would be an interesting scenario looking at a superconnected system coupled with billions of what are largely emotive, irrational people. I think a lot of interesting emergent patterns will come out of that. My question is mainly the scenario, and I'd like some comments, that what we're looking at is people increasingly having their senses, the way we develop our direct senses being replaced by indirect means, but also having at our fingertips a vast amount of information. I don't think it's knowledge. I think it's largely information, but importantly, information that very often lacks context. How do we deal with that? And what are the consequences?
Well, I think in relation to the field of brain research, as an example that's close to home for me, bioinformatics system, this whole notion of big data is taking it has really taken hold in the United States in particular, because there's an acknowledgement that big data means something, it's very valuable. But I think where we're starting to see more interest is in trying to apply big data into vertical market segments where we can really apply contextual information to that big data to derive some meaningful extraction from that. And so I think what you're saying is true. It is a challenge, but it's something that's challenging today because we're only at the beginning of this innovative journey around cloud computing, around the intersection of big data with bioinformatics systems, with a lot more contextual data about the user. But it's only an unknown today because we're just starting at the starting point of this innovation. Within the next 18 months, we'll start to see much more complex systems that will allow us to derive a lot more meaning from the data. For example, the work that we're doing now with brain data, for example, the whole idea of being able to have a very large connected database of brain images allows us to extract far more subtle features over long periods of time. A lot of cognitive development disorders actually happen over long periods of time. So the abnormality develops in some regions of the brain over long periods of time, which means that when you take a snapshot of the condition today, and then in 3 months' time you may take another snapshot, you're not able to get that longitudinal data, which is very, very important to see how the condition is actually developing in the brain. So being able to collect that information over much longer periods of time allows us to now derive a lot more meaning and therefore build much more sophisticated predictive models around when it's likely to occur and who are the target groups that are more likely to be at risk. And so I think some of these things are starting to emerge more and more because we can become much more sophisticated in the data sets that we're collecting.
Hi, this is Jessica Dunn from ResMed Limited. I have a question mainly directed for Tan Le. How do you navigate the moral and ethical minefield of reading people's brains? And have you considered reading the brains of, people we don't understand really well? For instance, autistic people, infants, or even bridging into understanding animal brains?
I think that's a really great question. I mean, the whole idea of what we're trying to do is to really get a much better picture of what's going on in the brain. The technology platform itself is relatively agnostic in the sense that it's a high-resolution brain scanning device that's focused on electroencephalography. So it's taking observations of patterns of neurons changing, firing inside the brain. So at that level, it's really not reading your brain. the software level and the algorithms that we build on top of that to try and decipher what those complex electrical fluctuations actually mean is where we derive meaning from those electrical signals. And yes, I think there are some challenges when we get to a point where we can truly read people's minds. But right now, with where the technology is at, it's more about enablement. So it's allowing people who may have been disabled through a car accident. One example is a beautiful girl. 10 years she's not been able to move anything. She's been paralyzed from the neck down. And finally, she's able to move an electric wheelchair just with her thoughts. She's able to smile because finally she's engaging with her world in a completely different way. And for the family and for the person, it's a transformative technology. It's really impacted their lives in a very meaningful way. And I think from that standpoint, I think the technology has made a very big impact. Obviously, on another spectrum, looking at it to play video games is one other application which is not so interesting. It's trivial, but it is one way in which the business can make money. And so it's, at the end of the day, it's a technology platform that's an enabler, and how we apply it is really where we're going to see the most impact.
Let me comment on reading minds, which we really can't do yet. And even if we could do, there's a certain challenge. Let me explain first how the mind works.
You have 30 seconds,
yeah,
Ray.
No, it's a 45-second explanation. We have 1 billion, approximately, that's a real number, pattern recognizers in the cortex, which is where we do our hierarchical symbolic thinking. So at one level, these little recognizers go, aha, a crossbar of a capital A, and that sends it up to a higher level, and at that level, it's got some other inputs, and it goes, aha, a capital A, and then it sends it up to a higher level, and at that higher level might go, aha, the word apple. And at a very high level, it might go, oh, that was funny, she's pretty, or that's ironic. And when we think about our memories or our thoughts, it's composed of these kinds of very high-level symbols, but they're not labeled with language. So if, in fact, you could read a mind, and we don't have technology yet with that precision that could do that in real time, you would say, okay, this person is thinking symbol 426,311, another symbol, another symbol, another symbol. In order to understand that, you'd have to go down to see what patterns it's comprised of at a lower level, and those patterns are each comprised of patterns at a lower level. It would be very hard to interpret. You'd have to look at the entire state of all the levels below it, in millions or hundreds of millions of different recognizers or modules below that, the one that's actually being focused on. So it's, even if you could actually see that, it's not easy to interpret and then give say a language description of this person is thinking, Mary had a little lamb. Ultimately, I think we will have technology that can do that kind of thing, but it's not, around the corner.